Long before the arrival of colonization, during the pre-colonial era, there existed a powerful and majestic kingdom called the Oyo Empire. This empire, which was the heart of the Yoruba nation, stood as the dominant force in West Africa, ruling over not just the Yoruba kingdoms, but also influencing many neighboring nations. The Oyo Empire was renowned for its wealth, its military strength, and its unique political structure. The neighboring villages and smaller kingdoms in the region, while powerful in their own right, all paid tribute to the Oyo Empire, acknowledging its supremacy and greatness. At the top of the Oyo political system was the Alaafin, the king, who was considered a divine ruler. The Alaafin had ultimate authority over all matters in the kingdom, both secular and spiritual. However, he was not alone in his rule. He had the help of a council called the Oyomesi, a group of 7 powerful and prominent ministers who assisted the Alaafin in managing the empire's affairs. The Oyomesi had significant influence and were responsible for making important decisions. The leader of this council, the Bashorun, was the most powerful figure in the empire after the Alaafin. The Oyo Empire was home to a formidable military, particularly known for its cavalry, which was one of the most elite and effective fighting forces in the entire African continent. The Oyo cavalry was composed of highly skilled riders who were known for their speed and accuracy in battle. They were feared by their enemies for their ability to strike quickly and retreat just as fast, making them a near-invincible force in warfare. This cavalry, combined with their strategic use of advanced weaponry obtained through trade with Europeans and Arabs, made the Oyo military extremely strong. Unlike many of their neighbors, the Oyo had access to firearms and other advanced tools of war, which gave them a distinct advantage in conflicts. In addition to their military strength, the Oyo Empire had a thriving economy, largely based on agriculture. The fertile land allowed for the constant growth of crops, which sustained the empire's population and contributed to its prosperity. The empire's wealth was also bolstered by its trade networks, which extended to Europe and the Arab world. These trade relations allowed the Oyo to acquire not just weaponry, but also luxury goods, enriching the empire and further cementing its position as one of the most powerful states in Africa. Despite these strengths, the Oyo Empire eventually began to decline, much like many great empires throughout history. The fall of the Oyo Empire is often linked to the rise of 2 controversial figures, Bashorun Gaha and Afunjar. Bashorun Gaha was a man of great power and influence who became the head of the Oyomesi in 1750. His rise to power was not by chance, since Gaha came from a long line of Bashoruns, and the position of Bashorun was hereditary in his family. He was well educated in the ways of politics, diplomacy, warfare, and even the use of charms and magic. In his youth, Gaha was known as a brave and powerful warrior, and many believed he had mystical powers, including the ability to change into different animals. This reputation only added to his fearsome presence, and he was admired by the people of Oyo for his courage in defending the empire against the Dahomey kingdom's raids and in suppressing banditry. Because of his heroic actions, Gaha was loved by the people in his early years, and his rise to power seemed a natural progression. However, once he became the head of the Oyomesi, Gaha's leadership took a darker turn. As Bashorun, he wielded tremendous power over the empire, especially when it came to the selection of kings. The Oyomesi, under Gaha's leadership, were known as the kingmakers, and it was their duty to select the new Alaafin whenever the throne became vacant. If the reigning Alaafin was considered ineffective or abusive, the Oyomesi had the power to dethrone him. To indicate the rejection of a king, the Oyomesi would present him with a calabash containing a parrot's egg or an empty calabash, symbolizing that the land, the people, and even the gods had rejected him. The king was then expected to either commit suicide or be exiled. Gaha, with his unrelenting ambition, used this power to place and remove kings at will, enthroning 5 kings and deposing 4 in just 24 years. Despite his power, Gaha's ambitions reached their limit. Although he had the authority to remove a king, there was one thing that prevented him from taking the throne himself: his blood. Gaha was not a descendant of Oranmiyan, the founder of the Oyo Empire. And for you to sit on the throne of Oyo, you needed to be descendant of Oranmiyan. This meant that he could never become king, no matter how much power he held. Nevertheless, Gaha's influence continued to grow, and he used his position to control the political landscape of the Oyo Empire. One of the most notorious acts of Gaha's tyranny was his role in the death of Alaafin Larbisi. After the death of the previous Alaafin, Gaha chose Larbisi as his candidate for the throne. However, in order to maintain control over Larbisi, Gaha killed off the king's supporters and isolated him from his power base. Larbisi, with no allies and under constant pressure, eventually committed suicide. He had the shortest reign in the history of Oyo, as he was only enthroned for 17 days. Gaha's manipulation did not stop there. After Larbisi's death, Gaha placed a new king on the throne, Alaafin Awombiorju. But just like his predecessor, Alaafin Awombiorju quickly fell out of favor with Gaha. The new king wanted to rule independently, but Bashorun Gaha saw this as a threat and challenge to his authority, so he had him dethroned, which led to Alaafin Awombiorju committing the ritual suicide. Gaha's manipulation of the throne continued when he placed Alaafin Agboluaje on the throne. Alaafin Agboluaje ruled for a remarkable 20 years, from 1750 to 1770. During his reign, the empire saw a period of relative peace and prosperity. Under Alaafin Agboluaje's rule and leadership, the empire continued to thrive with advances in trade, agriculture, and even military strategy. But like all the others before him, Alaafin Agboluaje's reign eventually came to a tragic end. The fall of Alaafin Agboluaje marked the beginning of the final decline of the Oyo Empire. He celebrated the Bebe Festival, a 3-year Yoruba traditional festival that was celebrated after a king had years of a long, successful, and peaceful reign. Alaafin Agboluaje celebrated this festival in grand fashion and invited various leaders and kings from neighboring tribes and nations to attend and celebrate the festival with him. This act, which was intended to celebrate his reign, became a harbinger of the king's downfall. During the festival, Alaafin Agboluaje's friend, the king of Popo, dressed in a way that rivaled with Alaafin Agboluaje's attire. This was just like one of the bridesmaids in a wedding, wearing a more beautiful white wedding gown and outshining the bride on the bride's special day. This angered Bashorun Gaha, and he considered this incident as a disrespectful act towards the Oyo throne and its legacy. He thereby declared war on the king of Popo. Alaafin Agboluaje and the king of Popo were very close friends. Therefore, he tried intervening by begging Gaha to take back his declaration of war. But Gaha refused. The Alaafin then sent a warning to his friend, telling him to escape unless he might face his end. Alaafin Agboluaje's refusal to start an expedition against his friend led to the Oyomesi rejecting him on the basis of him trying to protect a person who disrespected the Oyo throne and legacy. This rejection led to his death, which he committed by taking his own life. After the death of the Alaafin, his brother Majiogbe became the new king of Oyo. Alaafin Majiogbe knew that as long as Bashorun Gaha was alive, he would struggle to rule effectively. He also wanted to avenge his brother's death, so he made every effort to get rid of Gaha. However, instead of weakening him, Gaha only became more powerful. During this time, Gaha's sons had grown old enough to enter the political world, and like their father, they became cruel tyrants, oppressing the people of the Oyo Empire. Various oral history versions claim that during Alaafin Majiogbe's reign, Gaha's sons and head slave committed many murders and murs. When these crimes were reported to the Council of Ministers, the accusers were punished instead of the criminals. It was also said that Gaha's sons collected multiple tributes that were meant for the royal house in the empire's treasury and kept it for themselves. Another version also claimed that Gaha ordered the massacre of one of his wife's family members after she was accused of attempting to poison him. Alaafin Majiogbe realized that Gaha's growing power posed a serious threat, and he feared that Gaha would eventually kill him as he had killed previous kings, so he took steps to protect his palace. He consulted medicine men who gave him charms and jars for protection, but when the time came to use them, they failed. Alaafin Majiogbe's fears came true when a son of his got into a fight in a part of town controlled by Gaha. This gave Gaha a clear chance and justification to attack Alaafin Majiogbe. Gaha's forces broke through the palace defenses and eventually killed Alaafin Majiogbe. However, before his death, Alaafin Majiogbe managed to poison Gaha. Although the poison didn't kill him, it left him paralyzed. After the death of Alaafin Majogbe, Alaafin Abiodun ascended to the throne of the Oyo Empire. He was the fifth and last king enthroned by Bashorun Gaha. Like his predecessors, Alaafin Abiodun harbored a deep fear of Gaha's political influence and immense power. To maintain peace and secure his reign, Alaafin Abiodun felt compelled to pay homage to Gaha, aware of the threat his authority posed. However, the situation took a turning point when Bashorun Gaha committed his most shocking act of cruelty, murdering Abiodun's only daughter, Agbonyin. Gaha had needed a deer for a sacrificial ritual to boost his mystical strength and powers. Unable to find one, he ordered his men to kill Agbonyin, the Alaafin daughter, who Gaha at that time was married to. It was said that the reason he had her killed was that her name, Agbonyin, sounded so similar to Agbonrin, the Yoruba name for deer. Therefore, Alaafin Abiodun's daughter died as a substitute for an animal sacrifice. This act pushed Alaafin Abiodun to his breaking point. Stricken with grief, he pretended to be ill and slipped out of the palace to meet a trusted ally in a nearby village. Together they sought help from Are Onor Kakanfo, or Yabi, the commanding general of the Yoruba military who lived in Ajase. Oyabi listened to the Alaafin's story, took pity on him, and agreed to assist him. In 1774, attacks were launched against Gaha and his children across the kingdom. These attacks were led by Oryabi and Alaafin Abiodun, who fought together side by side. The warriors advanced to Oyo Ile, where they faced fierce resistance from Gaha's army. After a bloody battle with many casualties on both sides, Alaafin Abiodun's forces emerged victorious. Gaha was captured and brought to the market square in Akasan, where he was bound to a pole and burned alive. It is believed that this was done to prevent his spiritual power from allowing him to reincarnate, as it was feared that if he were to return, he would bring chaos upon the land. Before his execution, Gaha begged for mercy, but his pleas were ignored due to the immense suffering and unrest he had caused the villagers. After Gaha's death, Alaafin Abiodun ordered the execution of many warriors who had supported Gaha to eliminate potential threats. While this move was intended to prevent rebellion, it also led to a decline in Oyo's military strength, as many great warriors and commanders were lost during this period in Delphi. This marked the beginning of the empire's military decline. During Bashorun Gaha's regime, he was able to keep most of the regional states in check and prevent any form of rebellion. But after his death and the decline in the military strength of the forces in the capital city, the regional states began to regain their independence, which eventually weakened the empire's power, although it would eventually take another 60 years for the Oyo Empire to completely collapse. 2 years after Gaha's death, Alaafin Abiodun invited Oryabi to Oyo to honor him, but Oryabi, weakened by poor health, died on the way. Abiodun then went on to rule over a long period of peace and prosperity before passing away in 1789.